Hello and welcome to the first of three sessions, three excellent webinars which we've assembled to talk about carrier Ethernet services. We're going to talk about the state of carrier Ethernet services today, what they are and how they fit into the enterprise environment. And then we'll talk more about the value proposition of those Ethernet services and how they play in the market in general. As well as we'll conclude with a third session on the future of Ethernet services and where they're going in the future. My name is John Hawkins. I'm a product marketing manager for carrier Ethernet services at Ciena. I'm joined today by Daniel Barlev, who is Director of Strategic and Certification Programs at the MEF, and we'll talk more about that, as well as Alex Connors, Head of Fixed Connectivity Products for Vodafone Global Enterprise. We want to talk a little bit about where Ethernet has come from. And Daniel, I'll turn to you to give us some background on the MEF and the state of Ethernet today in the market.
Well, the MEF is a standards organization. We've been around since 2001. In fact, we're the organization that, together with our members, over 200 members, like Vodafone and Ciena, have defined carrier Ethernet services and have created this $50 billion market, carrier Ethernet services market that we have today. And carrier Ethernet services market is actually the fastest growing segment in this market. And actually we talk about that shortly. So I'd like to hear perhaps from you, Alex, how would you characterize the use of carrier Ethernet among your customers?
Yeah, we're seeing lots of growth in the demand for Ethernet services, as you've rightly said. And it's really been driven by four challenges that our customers are facing. So within Vodafone Global Enterprise, we're looking after large global organizations that have got global networks. And the four challenges that most of those are facing, starting off with cloud, right? The push to the cloud. And this has been talked about for a number of years, but really in the last couple of years, we're seeing large organizations really starting to take that on board, really pushing their applications and their services into the cloud environment. The outshot of that, or the result of that, is the second challenge. It's about forcing much more bandwidth across the network. So customers' demand for bandwidth is growing through the roof, but quite often their budgets aren't changing. So how do they handle, within the same budget they have to manage their wide area network, the demand for increased bandwidth across the network? The third area is flexibility. So customers want their businesses to change and grow and move rapidly as their business environment changes. Now, quite often their wide area network just doesn't really allow that. If they want to enter into a new market, or if they want to grow a particular site or the data that goes to that site, how do they do that with their network? How do they do that rapidly? So that's the third challenge. And then the final one is security. In fact, that's the one that's often at the top of most people's list if you talk to IT directors and IT managers, is security. And that's either driven by their own internal policies, so these are the policies that they as a company have, or it's driven by regulation. So in their particular country, this is what the regulator says they must do with their data. So things like data sovereignty, where does the data sit and where does that data travel? And we see Ethernet helping out with all of those things. So all of those four challenges, customers are looking to Ethernet to try and help them address those challenges, particularly with the one I mentioned first of all, which is about the drive towards the cloud.
And perhaps goes unsaid as well as just the baseline expectation that the service is always available. So the applications have now moved out of my building into the cloud, and if I can't reach that cloud, I'm essentially out of business. So the availability of that network, of that connectivity becomes just table stakes, yeah. Which we still need to keep in mind as well.
So perhaps it's worth just reviewing what is a carrier Ethernet service, because we say we've defined it, it's a big market. What is a carrier Ethernet service? I mean, really, it's about creating connectivity across sites, whether they're in the metro or a country or across the world, but making it look like it's actually just within your campus. It should be completely transparent.
Correct.
So, John, perhaps could you outline the key features you see in carrier Ethernet services that make it so relevant for the enterprise market
Right,
today?
right. Well, you mentioned transparency. I think that's one of the big aspects. Is it's irrespective of my application. It's irrespective of my usage. I want that to be a transparent service. There's an aspect of visibility as well. I want to be able to see how that network is performing over time. See that as an enterprise, I'm getting what I pay my carrier for. And all of these are what we have defined carrier Ethernet to be within the context of the MEF for the most part, in terms of how does Ethernet, which used to be a LAN technology, has now evolved into a carrier WAN technology and independent of reach to deliver all of those kind of things.
So, Alex, carrier Ethernet services are defined to run over any type of infrastructure. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why a lot of our customers are turning to Ethernet at the moment, because of the flexibility of the technology. It doesn't really matter what the underlying architecture is, it still delivers a high quality, highly reliable service. One thing that is important though is that the customers will choose the technology depending on what attributes they want for their business. So let me give you an example, right? There are certain customers where performance is everything and predictability is everything. So they will choose an optical Ethernet service that will be delivered in a particular way that will deliver that performance. Other customers might be happy with a slightly lower cost service where performance is less important, but reliability is more important. They might require Ethernet over MPLS. So basically customers can choose the underlying technology or the underlying infrastructure, Ethernet over the top, and match that to the needs of their particular organisation.
Perhaps a few words on verticals.
Yep.
What sort of customers are you seeing using these services? Why is it growing so fast? Why is it important to them?
Yeah. So I think as of today, actually it spans all verticals. But if you think about a few years ago, the vertical that was really the trailblazer was the financial services organisations. And they were really looking at Ethernet for a number of reasons. The most important one was about predictability. So a lot of these organisations were using it for algorithmic trading, and the most important thing is the service must perform in the same way all the time, day in, day out. This is not a new message; it's a message that's been around for 2 or 3 years. So those guys were there, blazing away, usually buying circuits of 300, 400, 500 meg services. Now we're seeing the usage broaden across a number of different verticals. We're seeing a lot within IT services. And it's within that market actually we're seeing the demand for really high bandwidth services. So up to 100 gig now, which we would have never seen in the enterprise space 2 or 3 years ago. That was always the carriers that were selling bandwidth to each other at that speed. But now we're seeing enterprise buy 10 gig, 100 gig services. So definitely IT services, healthcare. So any organisation that is requiring to transfer large amounts of data around their organisation.
So, John, why is it happening now? Is it bandwidth? Is it the cloud? What is it?
It's the combination of these, yes. And it's easy enough to describe just a bandwidth challenge, but that really is the bottom line, is whether it is the financial sector or healthcare is another example that, at least in the North American context, has driven a lot of interest because of high-resolution imaging being transported about the hospital systems and clinic systems that are far-flung throughout the country. And there's utilities and half a dozen other examples we could go through, just driving a lot of video-based content around. I think that's the main challenge, is just raw bandwidth.
So, carrier Ethernet services, well-established market, fastest growing segment. Asking ourselves, why now?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, because as we said, Ethernet's been around for a long time. It's not particularly new technology, and it's been around in the WAN for a long time. I think the key thing for our customers' perspective, why now, is going back to one of the things we were saying at the beginning. It's about the cloud service and the cloud services and the move of customers' solutions or requirements into the cloud. And that is driving more and more demands onto the network. So if customers' services, applications are sitting within the cloud, then the network's got to be able to handle that. The network has got to be able to give end users the right performance across the network who are accessing those services that are sitting within the cloud. And so it requires a different way of implementing the wide area network. It requires different technologies with different attributes, and I think that's where Ethernet comes in, because it does give customers the predictability they need across the network and the control that they need across the network.
While making everything transparent.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think from a customer's perspective, that's one of the main reasons. For us, Vodafone has spent the last 3 years really investing in our layer 3 global network, expanding that across the world. And then over the last 6 months, moving forward to the next 12 months, that investment is all pouring into the Ethernet space because of what we've been talking about, doing exactly the same thing. So growing our Ethernet network across the world, replacing our core network infrastructure with optical technology that will enable customers to grow up to these 100 gig speeds that we were talking about before, which can't be met by any other technology. So I think for our customers, it's the here and now is very clear. It's all about the cloud, and Vodafone is investing in our network to meet that need for our customers.
And for Ciena, a very similar situation where we've been investing for some time in optical and packet networks for customers like Vodafone, and providing the value proposition of Ethernet to their end users, which is the topic of our next webinar. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope you will join us for the value proposition of Ethernet in our next session.